look at two examples. So, this is an example from two courses that I have taught. So, in a course on computer programming where the topic was arrays, the pre-class activity that the students had to do was to watch a video that defines an array. What is an array? So, the video basically says that an array is nothing but a collection of elements, and this is the way to define an array in C++, and then it shows C++ examples on using arrays. So, simple examples of how arrays can be declared in a program and how they can be used in a program. So, that is the pre-class activity which does this video, very similar in idea to the Khan Academy video that we saw. And then the in-class activity were of two types. Okay. One type was to give a worksheet which has problems or programs using arrays. Now, for some of these programs, the program was given and the students had to predict the output. Okay. So, in some cases, so there are three typical ways in which computer programming can be encouraged. So, one is by asking students to predict the output of some program. In another case is to asking students to debug a given program, and in the third case is by asking them to write programs. So, what we did was to have students predict the output of some of these programs, then debug other programs, and also insert missing code into the programs. So, what this worksheet actually did for the student was that instead of simply knowing the topic of arrays in theory and having seen some examples of arrays, they now actually worked with programs in the class, and wherever they got stuck, they could simply raise their hand, and either a TA or the instructor or one of their peers would be available in order to clarify the point at which they were stuck. So, that was actually a good session for the students, because they were actually working with the content and not simply listening to the content. The second in-class activity that we did was getting them to write think, pair, share activity to write a program to sort the array. So, for example, in the think phase, all that the students had to do was to come up with some pseudocode idea of how will I sort 10 numbers. Suppose 10 numbers are given, what is the mechanism that I will use in order to sort those 10 numbers. So, those 10 numbers are the array. Then in the pair phase, the students can go on to work with a partner to write the C++ code for sorting their numbers, and in the share phase they can go on to looking at comparing their program with the instructor's program to sort the array. So, that was the think, pair, share activity for this flipped classroom. Here is another example. This is an example from another course called communication networks, and the topic was IP addressing. Okay, so, the topic of IP addressing once again is a topic which I used to find a little, had a lot of information transmission in it. So, the pre-class activity here was that they simply watched a video that described the basic mechanism for assigning IP addresses in a network. Okay. So, the pre-class activity was simply watching the video, and all that the video contained was that there are different classes of IP address, there is a class A, there is a class B, and there is a class C, and so on. Okay. Now, subsequently when they came to class, they did not need to be described what these various types of IP addresses are, and so they could simply directly go on to peer instruction questions on the IP address classes. So, you could give an IP address and ask them to identify whether it is a class A or a class B or a class C, or you could ask them to write the how does a class A address look. So, questions of that sort could be dealt with in the classroom. The second such activity that they could do was a debate on the pros and cons of hierarchical addressing. So, the way the internet addresses are set up, is that a good way, is there a better way to do the addressing of computers, was another debate that they could do. And the third activity that they did in the classroom was to design solutions to reduce the inefficient use of address space. So, sometimes the IP address space gets wasted because of one organization being allotted more IP addresses than it actually requires, and so the students themselves had to think of ways in which these inefficient use of this address space can be reduced, and then all that I had to do as the instructor was to point out that each of these solutions that the students came up with were nothing but the names of some of the efficiency increasing mechanisms that were already there in the internet, okay, and the details of those mechanisms then made the content for the next flipped classroom session.